On my starting stars. This is Blackstar PSN or Apollo Blackstar or Blackstar 359, whatever you feel like calling me. It really doesn't matter. But today we're not here to talk about the maps. I just had a different video planned for today, but we're not here to talk about DLC. We're not here to talk about anything other than what I'm going to talk about. Today is National Cancer Day. How do you know that? Well, I'm not going to say that I had it memorized or anything, but I found it on Twitter. I saw it on Twitter. And I was going to tweet about it. I tried, but I couldn't. I couldn't do it. Now you're probably going to ask, well, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I had cancer, or I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I had cancer, because I didn't. But I did know someone that was battling cancer. And it's hard to think about the fact that it's been almost 2 months since I lost my aunt, or at least one of them. And technically she's my great aunt, or actually technically she's my cousin. But I always treated her like she was my aunt, because she was treated like she was my mom's sister. So that's how I treated her. And like I said, it's hard to imagine the fact that it's been almost 2 months. Because from the time that I was little, I always remember her being around and her being there. Whether it be for my mom or for my family in general. When times were tough, she always seemed to be there. And she was such a big part of my family, and 9 grandkids. I mean, that's a lot of grandkids that loved her, and I think it's 10 now, because if I count right, it is 10 now, because another one was just born. And one of them will never see her Lela, is what they called her, because they couldn't say, one of the oldest one couldn't say grandma. You know, it's really hard for me to make something like this. I almost didn't do it. I actually didn't want to do this video. And ever since that, I've honestly taken cancer a little bit more seriously. I used to fuck around and tell people to get cancer when I was mad, but ever since then, I can't bring myself to say shit like that. Every time someone says it, like one of my friends said it the other day, and I popped off. Like, people don't know the struggle of what it feels to have a family member unless they've had it happen. I mean, some people just don't understand. Like, you know, I see on Twitter all the time people telling other people to get cancer, but they don't understand the pain of the family when it actually happens. My aunt was one of the brightest people I knew. She was so great. She was a good person. And one day she was just gone. I remember getting the news. I remember everything about that day. It was supposed to be a happy week. It was Thanksgiving. We had early Thanksgiving for her on Sunday, and I'm glad we had it that day because she died the next day. Not even 24 hours later, though. Exactly 20 hours later, my aunt was gone to this bastard called cancer. And that was the hardest thing for me to ever deal with. Knowing that someone that had basically been in my life for my whole life was just gone. Everyone knew who she was. And if you saw her, you expected, you expected a bunch of little youngins behind her. And you expected just good vibes. And what I want to say is, believe me or believe me not, because I know there's going to be some people thinking that I faked this. Believe me or believe me not. Take time to think about the people with cancer, dude. Take time to think about their families. When you make that joke, you don't understand that families daily are hurt because they lost a member like that. People don't seem to understand that it is a terrible thing to joke about. People joke about it, and I'm not gonna sit here and say I didn't ever do that, because I did. I'll take responsibility for what I used to say. I'll take that responsibility. I don't care. I know what I did. I know what I used to say. I haven't said that once since. Every time I hear someone say it, I get offended. And I heard someone say it at school, and I asked them nicely not to say it. You could ask me why. I said, because you don't know if he's actually been affected by someone having cancer. I was like, you say that you'll end up with cancer. I was like, it's terrible to wish that upon somebody. You've never experienced someone going through cancer? I said, really? How do you know? You don't know my life? I just had someone pass away. And to hear that was the worst thing ever. People just seem to think of it as some sort of joke, and people not to get offended by it, but that's one of the worst things you can say. Get cancer. Who really deserves it at that point? Who really deserves it at that point? That's a terrible thing to wish upon people, and I will take responsibility for ever saying it. Because I know what I used to say. I ain't afraid to admit it. But now, I've seen difference in it. You don't tell someone to get cancer. You don't tell someone, I hope their family member gets cancer. People don't seem to understand what others have gone through. if I had money, I promise I would be giving a lot to cancer research. Because the fact that it's almost 2 months, that 2 months will turn into a year, 2 years without her. She was 51. 51. Her father died of cancer. She did too. It, and I really do miss her so much. No one saw me, but my dad did. No one saw me cry. No one saw me shed a single tear. Everyone thinks that I was okay. No one knows that what I felt. I I was in pain. That night I waited for everyone to fall asleep and I cried. I didn't let anyone see me. I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't need comforting. I didn't want comforting. Because I had to show myself being strong. Because if I didn't, who was gonna? My mom was constantly on the verge of tears. Teammate bumped me. He was constantly on the verge of tears. My grandmother was crying. My grandmother, the happiest person I've ever met, was crying.
UAV awaiting orders.
The person I never wanted to see cry was crying. Because I was her last niece. I was her last niece left. And she's gone now. That was her last remaining piece from her sister. From either one of her sisters. That was her last piece from the sisters. My grandma is the only sister of 3 left. All because of cancer. It doesn't make sense to me how people joke about this anymore. Especially not with families out there daily. I have to deal with this. And I miss her. I really do.